Hey, shalom, shalom, shalom. I want to first start off by giving infinite praises to Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushua Ba'ashim Kakwadash. Double honor to my apostles and elders, a great millstone that rule well. And peace and citations to the elect men pushing out this word in truth and sincerity. This is Brother Yakanan from the DC Church. And the topic I wanted to touch on today, and Lord's will, this video is entitled, Guard Your Tongue, And I was just meditating, a few things, and one of the topics that came into my mind is, how watchful you have to be when it comes to speech, and how important speech is in terms of communication, in terms of how things get perceived, when everything is said and done, because a lot of things don't really necessarily have to do with being right or wrong. It has to do with timing, opportunity, and perception. And the last thing you want to do, in this faith, in this ministry, is to offend unnecessarily. And the key word there is unnecessarily. Going out of your way to offend, or making the right statement at the wrong time, because there is such thing as saying something right at the wrong time and doing something right at the wrong time. It's the time and place. The scriptures even talk about time and place. So I just wanted to get a few scriptures on that. Just basically going into the importance of your tongue, and how to guarding your tongue, and just being mindful of how of the perception that you give off and the words that you speak, because that is speech is one of the most it's the most important tool that we use in general, not even when it comes into this ministry, of course, when it comes into this ministry, but in general. So even when you're going out there into the world, this is these are good excerpts to put an understanding into why you should be mindful of the things that you speak and how you present yourself. Now this is Proverbs chapter 13 verse 3. It says, "He that keepeth his mouth keepeth his life, but he that openeth wide his lips shall have destruction." So that's plainly put. If you keep or guard your mouth, you have the ability to keep your life. Meaning your mouth and your lips and your tongue can put you in situations to where death and destruction can be a possibility. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical death. It could just be destruction of things that you've built, a certain dynamic or relationship that you had, or or basically the perception that you give off in general. It could destroy your reputation. So it's destruction, woe, and death in many aspects, not just one. It's destruction in many, many, many aspects. So it doesn't necessarily have to go with the physical destruction. You can destroy things that you've built that can't be physically seen. And that's if you don't guard your tongue. And also, if you say the right things at the right time, it can also have it can have the opposite effect. You can actually build yourself up in terms of perception and outlook and standing in all different aspects in your life. It just really depends on timing and what's being said and how you say it. Now this is Psalms chapter 141 verse 3. It says, "Set a watch, O Lord, before my mouth, keep the door of my lips." And this scripture just goes to prove that that this being able to do that is a gift. And this is something that you should pray for, that the Lord does for you. That the Lord is able to keep the door of your lips, meaning the Lord is able to set a specific boundary that you don't cross when it comes to your speech and how and the things that you say. You know, it says, "Set a watch, O Lord, before my mouth. Keep the door of my lips." You know, and that just really goes, and that reminds me of, you know, a prayer that I always say, you know, when I know I'm going to have an interaction that can have lasting effects, whether it's going out to speak at camp, whether it's uh, you know, whether it's your day to day life, speaking to certain people, you know, maybe at the job, the plantation, or, you know, when it comes to your parents or anything in that aspect. You know, keep the door, Lord, just guard my mouth. Allow what's it called? Bless my debarim. You know, bless my words. You know, and that's a mindset, and that's a prayer that we always want to be sending out. You know, the Lord, you know, keep my lips, you know, and bless my words. You know, because you could say the same thing that you would have said, you know, without the Lord blessing it, and get an opposite effect. You know, so we always want to pray that the Lord guards our lips and blesses our words. You know, even if they're the same words that we would have used regardless, Lord, just bless those same words. You know, of course, because of course, you know, we're not perfect. We want to be guided by, you know, righteous speech. You know, we want to be able to get the effect that we're what's it called, the effect that we're going for. You know, because the last thing that you want to be is a babbler, somebody that just talks and talks and talks and talks and talks without a purpose. You know, the words that you speak should always have a purpose. There should always be a specific purpose behind them. You know, the last thing that you want to do is being a rambler, because that's the easiest thing. The easiest thing to ruling a good thing is to say too much. You know, the last thing you want to do is say too much or do too much. You know, there is a right amount of everything. You know, and you could be doing the right thing, but too much of it. You know, and that goes into words, and that goes into words a lot. You know, just saying too much, doing too much, and it could have the opposite effect that you're going for. You know, you may see something working, you know, when it comes to speech, but when you do too much of it, it can have the opposite effect, you know, and that's something that we're trying to avoid, and that's why we pray that the Lord blesses our words. You know, now that goes into the next verse. This is Colossians chapter 4, verse 6. It says, "Let your speech always be always with grace, seasoned with salt." You know, so let your speech be always be always with grace, seasoned with salt. You know, you want to make sure that you're coming off your you know, we want the way that we come off when we speak to come off right. You know, and we want the purpose that we speak to be accomplished, you know, in the right fashion, in the right way. You know, and the perfect way to go about it is, you know, to season it with salt. Make it digestible for the for the audience that you're trying to reach. You know, make what you're saying digestible for the people that you're trying to reach. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean that they that they're gonna agree or understand it, but the goal should be to get your point across without either offending or looking like you're unlearned. You know, or looking like you're unlearned, or anything of that nature. You know, basically coming off the wrong, in a way that you wouldn't want to come off. You know, and the best way to do it is to season your words with salt. Make it digestible for the audience that you're trying to reach. And this is exactly why we pray that the Lord blesses our words. You know, because who can give grace at the end of the day is Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. The only way that we can really get that grace with our words is if the Lord allows it. You know, it says that she may know how to answer every man. You know, so doesn't so guarding your lips and guarding your mouth, and guarding your tongue doesn't necessarily mean that you should be quiet at all times and be a mute. It means knowing knowing when the right knowing the right words to use at the right time in the right setting, you know? So because we're supposed to give an answer to every man. But the thing is that we want to give the right answer, you know? And the right answer usually comes with time. And it comes with time, and it comes with setting, and it comes with place. And that's something that you want to always be mindful of, you know? This doesn't necessarily mean not to be a mute and don't say anything. It just means to be mindful of the things that you say and say it at the right time. So just basically, having a conscience when it comes to the things that you say and do. Now, this is Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21. It says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that have it shall eat the fruit thereof." And that's plainly put. That just goes to show, when you actually do open up your lips and say something, it's a gamble every time, because death and life are in the power of the tongue. And that just goes to show you how powerful words are. Words influence, words carry spirits, and we want to make sure the words that we carry are righteous spirits, not evil ones. We don't want to say, we don't want to destroy ourselves by the way of the things that we speak. The point of the things that we speak is to build, it's to build up, not destroy, when it comes to ourselves. The only thing that we're meant to destroy when it comes to our lips is lies, and even that is supposed to be done at a certain time and a certain setting, Now, this is, actually, I'll read Proverbs again. This is Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21. It says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that have it shall eat the fruit thereof." So they that have it shall eat the fruit thereof. So, basically, you sow what you reap, So if you sow in, words that aren't seasoned with salt, you sow in, unrighteous words or words that are, that don't benefit anyone. You're a babbler. You just say too much. The fruit, you're going to reap the fruit thereof, and, oppositely speaking, if the words that you're saying are, righteous, they're spoken short and concise at the right time in the right setting, when the opportunity presents itself, then you're gonna reap good things. You're gonna reap that too, and that's usually gonna come with positive outcomes. Now this is Matthew chapter 12, verse 36. It says, "But I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment." And that's exactly why you don't want to be a babbler. Because, like I said, we're in the flesh. We're not perfect. So, of course, there's going to be idle words that we speak. There's going to be things that we say that may not be necessary. But just know that, every idle word that you speak, you're going to have to give account for those words. And you want to be justified by everything that you say, And if you're not justified, you're going to be condemned by everything that you say. So that goes back into, being mindful of the things that you speak and guarding your lips, so you don't have to give account for things that you didn't mean, because the last thing that you want to be accountable for is things that you didn't even mean at the end of the day, words that you weren't thinking of, that you didn't give a second thought to, so that, keep that in mind. We want to stand on everything. We want to be in a situation where we stand on everything that we say, and it's kind of hard to do if you keep on talking, and letting things that you don't even mean come out of your mouth, so He says, now continuing on, this is verse Matthew chapter 12, verse 37. It says, for by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned. So the same word, it's by the same words, either you're going to be justified or condemned. So you want to be mindful of the words that you say, even if they're just idle filler words, you know. So literally every single thing that comes out of everything that proceeds out of your mouth, you're going to have to give account for it, you know. So be mindful of everything that you say, you know. Now, I'm going to end it off on Sirach, you know, these few scriptures in Sirach. This is Sirach chapter 5, verse 11. It says, be swift to hear and let thy life be sincere, and with patience give answer, you know. So be swift to hear. So make sure that you're actually understanding what you actually understand what you're replying to or answering, you know. So be quick to hear a matter, you know, actually listen and understand a matter before you even give a response to it. It says, and let thy laugh be sincere, and with patience give answer, you know. So and that's the important aspect, with patience, you know. Of course, you want to give an answer at the right time, you know, but you want to be patient in terms of, you know, being able to assess what being able to assess a specific situation and give that answer at the right time, you know. So if you have to, be patient with the answers that you're going to give, you know, because it may be a thing of timing. Because you could, like I said previously, you could give the right answer at the wrong time, and it's really just really a matter of understanding, you know, and that really can only be given, you know, by being apt to understand a specific situation, you know, and different aspects of a situation, as opposed to just knowing what right and wrong is for a specific question. Now, continuing on, this is Sirach chapter 5, verse 12. It says, if thou hast understanding, answer thy neighbor. If not, lay thy hand upon thy mouth. You know, and that goes into it. If you have understanding, answer your neighbor. You know, speak to what you know. But if you don't, which is not a sin, and it's not a sin if you don't know things. You know, if you don't have understanding of specific things, it's not a sin. It's not a sin to not know, you know, because there's nothing there's nothing stopping you from being able to know and understand in the future. But if you give an answer to things and you babble about things that you don't know, well, that can bring about sin, because you may say things that are that offend that other person, and most importantly, offend the Lord, Yahweh Hashem Yahushai. You know, so if you don't have the answer, or you have little of understanding of something, you know, be patient until you're able to get the answer, or point somebody in the direction to where you know where the answer is. And that's all a part about guarding your lips and knowing when to speak to certain things. And that goes back into my other point. It doesn't mean that you're supposed to be a mute and not say anything. It just means that you're supposed to say certain things at certain times, you know. Now, verse 13, it says, honor and shame is in talk, and the tongue is of a man is his fall. And that, just like life and death is in the power of the tongue, honor and shame. You could be put to shame by your words, you know. You could be put to shame by your words, meaning you could be put into a situation into where the same words that you speak put you to shame. And that could be done by ways of either you being a hypocrite, you saying you saying you saying something in the wrong setting, you speaking out of turn. You know, all different aspects of communication can go into putting you to shame by your words, you know. And that just goes back into being patient and have an understanding of the things that you're speaking of, and have an understanding of the situation that you're in, you know. And in the same like manner, honor could come by your words, meaning you say the right things at the right time, seasoned with salt and grace, and you're able to articulate yourself in a manner to where even if the answer that you give isn't understood, is respected, you know, because they're able to tell that understand, even if they don't understand themselves, they're able to understand that there's understanding behind those words, there's experience behind those words, there's righteous confidence behind those words, so that what's it called, honor can come from the tongue too, and the greatest honor that we're going to have from the tongue is the salvation that we're going to get from Yahweh Shai Mashiach. Because at the end of the day, what is this? What is the spirit? The spirit is the word, by the word, but it's by the word and the understanding thereof that we're going to be saved. And the understanding of the word is part of the understanding of the word is faith, so literally life and death are in the power of the tongue. We're going to get salvation by the words that we speak from Yahweh Shai and Mashiach. And that just goes to show how important speech, the tongue, and the lips are. We're going to get saved by these same words that we're preaching, and the understanding thereof, as long as we have faith, so that just puts it into a bigger perspective. Now, finishing out, this is Sirach chapter 5 verse 14. It says, "Be not a whisperer, and lie not in wait with thy tongue." So don't be eager to say something, or repeat something that you may hear. Not everything is for everybody to know. Not information. Information should be guarded too. Information needs to be. Information should be shared in a need to know basis. Meaning, tell and repeat the things only to people that need to know. Not information certain information is not for everybody to know. And if you worked in any work environment, you would know too. Certain thing. Even if you work in the same company, not all documents are meant to be shared for all eyes. Certain eyes are only supposed to see and hear certain things. Because otherwise that would just bring about confusion, because nobody would be able to understand it from the perspective of the people that need to know, from the same perspective as the people that need to know. Now, it says, "For foul shame is upon a thief, and an evil condemnation upon a double tongue. Be not ignorant of anything in a great matter or a small." And that's also an urge for you to be knowledgeable in things. Like I said, it's not a sin not to know things and understand things, but you're supposed to make the effort to know and to understand all the things that are within your ability to know and understand. Make it an effort. Make an effort to know and understand, these things, so you're able to actually speak and not offend and get honor from from your words. Otherwise, you really should be mute. The only reason why we should be speaking is because we know what we're speaking about. Not because we have the ability to. And the more that you know and the more that you understand, the more opportunity you will have. The more opportunity you will have to speak, because the more that opportunity is actually going to present itself. Now, hey, with that, I want to say, call Allah Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai. Double honors to my apostles and others, a great millstone, and peace and citations to the elect men pushing out this word of truth and sincerity. Till next time, I want to say shalom.